others to sign in, I suppose let me introduce myself. My name's Alex. Some of you know me because I may have invited you by LinkedIn, but many of you won't know me. First of all, I don't have all the answers, and I appreciate I probably look about 5 years old on this webinar session. But my team have distilled thousands of hours of marketing strategy and effectiveness research into this presentation, into this webinar. I was a marketing manager during the 2003 SARS outbreak in China, a marketing director during the 2008 financial crisis, marketing consultant during the MERS outbreak in Korea in 2015. And today I'm a marketing technologist and strategist in 2020 with a company called Tiendeo. Tiendeo has 8 offices globally, and our team of sort of 200 strong people. We've basically been working 24/7, for over a month now, helping retailers, brand owners, consumers in over 45 countries that we operate to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. To give you an idea, we work with a number of market-leading retailers and brands across all B2B sectors. So hopefully there's something of use to everyone that attends. We've tried to keep the advice actionable and high level. Any questions at this stage, guys, or we're just sort of waiting for people to arrive. To give you some background, I suppose, on who we currently work with. We work with in the automotive sector people like the Volkswagen Group, Nissan, Carglass. In the home and furnishing sector, we work with people like IKEA. We don't actually work with IKEA in Sweden, which is strange, but we do work with IKEA in Italy, Spain, across Europe. In the DIY building materials space, we work with companies such as Bauhaus, that you will know, in Sweden. In consumer finance, we work with Orange Bank. In the fashion space, we work with Kiabi. Some messages coming in. I'll just say hello. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. Just giving some, while we're waiting for people to attend, just giving some background on how this presentation, this webinar has been created, and what we can hope to achieve and share with you today. Good to see you, Prim. Thank you very much for coming. Jacob, lovely to see you. As I was saying, so the list is quite long. We work with hundreds of market-leading retailers and brands. To give you an idea, in the supermarket space, it's Lidl, Carrefour, major players. Telecoms, we work with Vodafone and Orange. We actually work with a lot of fast-moving consumer goods brands, so within major brand owners like Nestle and Danone. And I know today we have a number of people coming from Unilever. Consumer electronics, we've had a lot of experience in there, over 9 years experience of helping people in this space. So we work with both brand owners like HP and Samsung, but also retailers such as MediaMarkt. We actually work both directly with retailers and brands, but also with their agency partners. So PhD Media, someone that we work with globally. And I believe today, actually attending in Sweden, Decathlon are coming along. We work with them internationally, as well as sports retailers such as Intersport. And just to give you a flavor for the breadth of sectors that we have first-hand experience with. And we're going to share the best practices that we've learned over the last 9 years with all of these companies, but also our experience more recently in the last 6 weeks of addressing the COVID-19 challenge. Tiendeo don't just work with retailers, brands and agencies. We actually get unique feedback from more than 100 million consumers that use the Tiendeo shopping platform every month. So huge amounts of data. 100 million globally use our technology every month to plan their shopping. In Sweden, it's over 1.15 million. So well over 10% of the Swedish population use the Tiendeo platform to plan their shopping every month. Across the Nordics, it's about 2 million consumers use our technology to make their consumer experience easier, faster, and so on. So genuinely, we hope that our experience will help you optimize your communications in these genuinely challenging and to an extent unprecedented times. To give you a feel for what we'll be covering today, I've taken the attitude this should be an information-rich session. It's not a sales session. We're not trying to convince you to buy anything. Genuinely, we want it to be useful. So the idea is we're going to share a lot of information. You'll be provided with the slides after the webinar, so you don't need to take notes or anything. Your feedback and questions during the webinar will be useful. But the content we provide you with, the slides after the event, we're hoping that you can use this content to build the business case and create actionable playbooks for your own organization to help you do things smarter and faster, because that's what this crisis requires. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, and there's no need to make the mistakes that have been made in the past. And to be honest, we see a lot of retailers and brands are making the same mistakes again and again that have been made in the past that we know from studying best practice, don't work. It's my firm belief that if you implement even some of the recommendations that we make today, it's certain that you will outperform most marketeers in these uncertain times. And I think that's a really good reason for you to be spending 40 minutes of your time today. If you have any questions, please use the web chat feature within the webinar tool. And my colleagues are actively managing that. I will be mostly presenting to you today, but I will personally be addressing your questions at the end of the session. So we're going to have a lot of information to cover, and the plan is to address your specific questions at the end of the session. And in the future, if you want to have a one-on-one discussion with me, it'll be a pleasure. It's obviously fairly busy at the moment, but I genuinely will do my best to address each of you and try and be as helpful as possible. There's a lot of information to cover. So, Cesar, do you think it's sensible I sort of begin at this stage?
Yeah, I think you covered it all, and we're ready to start.
Cool. Well, let's get in there then. So this slide here, basically, this is derived from some Nielsen research. Sweden is currently in what seems to be quite a unique approach to the COVID-19 outbreak. Sweden's currently in what Nielsen termed the stage 4 quarantine living prep. You may well in Sweden move to a full lockdown, which is what most of the world is in, and even in Norway, Denmark, and Finland, full lockdown. In Sweden, no forced lockdown, but in reality, in Sweden, there's a very strong social contract, civic responsibility. So in Sweden, even though there's no forced lockdown mandated by the government, social distancing and self-isolation, they're already in effect in Sweden. So as a result, we're seeing very familiar patterns of consumer behavior in Sweden that we saw in Italy and France and the other countries, 45 countries we work with very closely. So we're seeing the same patterns. What I mean by that is on the 11th of March, the WHO declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. On the same day, Sweden announced, unfortunately, its first coronavirus-related death. That death caused a surge in disinfectant sales in Sweden. So in the week ending March 15th, there was over 1,000% growth in sales of disinfectant, sanitizer, that kind of thing in Sweden. The week following, just the same pattern we saw in other countries, Spain, France, etc. We saw pantry staples and household products booming. So there was over 100% growth in pasta, flour, powdered cream even. I think powdered cream is slightly more unique to Sweden. Today the situation is still still a voluntary lockdown in Sweden. Interestingly, on the 15th of April, the Public Health Agency in Sweden said that the death toll in Sweden was 1,203 people. So that's a rate of 118 deaths per million inhabitants, much lower than in France, Spain, UK, etc. But 118 per million is over double what Denmark have, who are in full lockdown. 55 is the deaths per million in Denmark. And in Finland, it's only 13 deaths per million of the population in Finland. So potentially Sweden might move to a stricter lockdown in the future. That's being discussed now by politicians. And interestingly, Denmark are actually now talking about reducing the lockdown. Anyway, so on to some interesting data. I mentioned that that Sweden is already behaving in a predictable way. These slides are actually from Google research, and they show that Swedish consumer behavior has changed at a national level. Interestingly, Tiendeo's unique geo-tracking technology, and indeed other research sources that we've been reviewing, they actually tell us that in the major cities, in Malmö, in Stockholm, in Gothenburg, in major cities and towns in Sweden, the trends are much stronger. So roughly half of Stockholm's workforce is now working from home or staying at home. They're not going to their physical workplace anymore. Public transport in Stockholm down by 50%. And the street's capital, I would say, based on aggregating about 4 or 5 different surveys we've looked at, it's 70% less busy than usual. So even though Swedes are allowed to go out, due to civic responsibility, you're seeing a very similar pattern to countries that are formally locked down. Interestingly, obviously in China, huge drop when COVID crisis broke out there. And we're seeing a similar impact in Europe. In the short term, this is. In Europe, the year-on-year sales in March, they're the worst they've ever been. Very depressing to share that with you, but that's the reality. This is a genuine crisis as such from a retail perspective, not just a human perspective. This slide here, globally there have been winners and losers. In Sweden, this is slightly less representative, perhaps this simplification, because obviously Swedes are still able to go to normal non-discretionary shops, restaurants, get their hair cut, that kind of thing. But the pattern is still true in Sweden and certainly in the Nordics as a whole. The interesting thing is that I think this is a positive thing. In China, we're already seeing Wuhan reopening. Denmark, as I mentioned, already talking about relaxing the lockdown. So the COVID-19 outbreak, it will come to an end. It's not going to end the human species. That's just no projection has put that. So that is a bit of good news as such. And good news is always nice when things are stressful and difficult. This is an interesting bit of research that my team have been using. When the COVID-19 threat has passed, we're very likely to see a short-term boom, consumer boom. It doesn't matter if the lockdown is voluntary or mandated. There's going to be a boom in consumer spending because people have been unable to do their normal consumer life. The only interesting thing that I would say is I genuinely believe the research shows that recession is coming. So perhaps that explains why today in China, the post-COVID-19 lockdown bounce, the boom after lockdown in Wuhan, for instance, hasn't been as dramatic than it was for the SARS outbreak that I was personally involved in doing marketing those days. So I think we are going to see a post-lockdown boom, but it's not going to be as strong. And the reality is, I think we're facing a recession. So in our marketing planning, we should be planning for that post-lockdown boom, but also planning for adapting our marketing for potentially a long-term recession scenario. What that means for us as marketers is in a COVID world, a COVID-19 world where we are now, we're directly affected by it, and in the future, companies that fast track their digitalization, the marketing digitalization, and actively invest in marketing, they're going to be the big winners. That's always been true in other recessions and in other viral outbreaks. I personally believe that Swedish retailers are in an incredibly strong position to recover faster than retailers in other countries. Sweden is known for being a very resilient country, as you'll see in the infographic here. And so I think Sweden's in a position to gain a relative competitive advantage globally from this crisis. Sweden typically is further along the digitalization journey than many other countries. And in the short term, of course, Swedish retailers have not been suffering as much from a formal lockdown. I'm based in Spain. I've been in lockdown for over a month now. Basically, it's only essential retailers such as pharmacies and supermarkets. They're the only people allowed to trade. No one else is allowed to trade. While in Sweden, a DIY company or a fashion company, they're still able to trade. So the economic impact of lockdown hasn't been experienced as much in Sweden. And I think that's from an economic point of view, I think that's a wise decision the Swedish government has made. It doesn't change the fact, though, we genuinely have really big threats to retail in Sweden. Already we're seeing bankruptcies and insolvency. So I would stress that cash, more than ever, cash is king. So as marketers, we need to think about not just return on investment, but speed of return on investment. You need to make sure that you have cash flow and liquidity. To give you an idea, on the 13th of April, Bain, I was invited to this webinar and I can share this information. Bain actually upgraded the risk of multi-quarter recession. Doesn't matter when the COVID-19 outbreak ends from their perspective, they believe we're entering a period of multi-quarter recession globally. So don't want to depress them too much, but that's what we believe is happening now. We're going to be running a survey now to get your perspective on some things. So my colleague Cesar will be posting some information now.
So, hi everyone. I will be sharing with you two surveys up to this point of the presentation, just to get a little bit more interaction from you guys. So if you could just help us answering, if you do think that Sweden will go into full lockdown, so you just can get your feeling from what you're living there. It'll be very interesting for us. We've got 35% of responses so far. Let's see if somebody else actually answers it, and if not, I will be publishing it very shortly. Very good, 65% of interaction, over 7. One more moment. Okay, I think we got everybody. I'm going to share the results, and well, up to this point, we have 47% of the attendees of our presentation that believe that Sweden will not go into full lockdown. That is a very important perspective for us from where you're living there. And another question now, up to this point, is what do you think COVID-19 outbreak will end? So 1 to 2 months, 4 to 12 months, or over a year? We have almost 20% of answers, 47%. Very good. I think we reached probably like everybody. I'm going to share the results. And we have 35% of the attendees that believe that we have the whole COVID outbreak will end in between 4 to 12 months. Good. Now back to the presentation with Alex.
Interestingly, those figures that my colleague Cesar just shared, those are very much in keeping with the results we've seen in other countries. But the majority, what I call the wisdom of crowds, suggests that 4 to 12 months is when COVID-19 will be will be dealt with effectively. So although it's a huge impact on our societies, it's not it's not forever. It's this is something we're going to get through. The next section that we're going to be looking at. Cesar, are you able to see the slide that I shared? Are you able to see that, Cesar? I've got Bit of a technical issue here. I do apologize. Not quite sure. I can't actually hear you, Cesar. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well. Sorry for the little problem there. We're back.
No problem. We'll get back to the seminar. Superb. So effectively, this slide here shows that the majority of countries, when surveyed, this is again a Nielsen survey I was involved in, they believe that it's 4 to 12 months is the norm. Some countries a bit more optimistic, some a bit more pessimistic. Moving on. So effectively, this is the next section that we will be addressing. And I think there's some important points here. This is, basically, there are some strong memes at the moment on, let's say, LinkedIn and other channels. COVID-19, we are seeing it having a catalyzing effect. It's driving the e-com boom, obviously, but it's also necessitating the digitalization of consumer comms generally. This meme here about who's the most influential in driving digital transformation in your business, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's a certain amount of truth to it. So that's why we decided to share that here. Slide. Digital communication is very much best practice in this scenario. As Gartner says, digitalize every customer interaction and shift to digital channels. It doesn't matter if you're an e-com only player or an omni-channel or purely physical store sales. Digital is the only channel that's going to enable you to actually communicate and monetize consumers effectively. In a world where social distancing and isolating is the reality. So in terms of the most important thing, if digital is the strategy, make sure digital is your core strategy in these days. It's all about optimizing the Marcoms mix within digital. What you've done historically, that won't work anymore as effectively. You need to change your marketing mix. The reality is marketing budgets are under threat, and you need to allocate that budget as intelligently as possible. This is a huge learning, from past crises, viral outbreaks, and from reviewing what B2C Marcoms pros are doing at the moment. We're seeing the same mistakes being made over and over again. To give you an idea, Tiendeo, we have over 1 million double opt-in email addresses in Sweden, just in Sweden. But open rates, click-through rates, post-click activation rates, they've all fallen dramatically since COVID-19, probably because email is being overused. It interrupts people, and consumers are overloaded with email. Just this morning, I've had over 200 emails talking from retailers and brands, talking about their approach to COVID-19 outbreak via email. So there's no way I could read it, and as a result, that channel is not working as it used to. Even before the COVID-19 outbreak, Forbes was saying that they thought email had had its day. Email really was booming in the 90s. It's still effective today, but not as effective in this situation. And certainly not effective for business acquisition. It might be effective for communicating with your existing customers, but not for driving new business. The channels that I believe, and research, our extensive research, shows that you should be focusing on. And you should invest early in these, as Gartner points out, because they, right now they're incredibly affordable, and you can really get some huge competitive advantage. Your own media. What I mean by that is websites, apps, the things that you own, your own channels. You need to optimize those, obviously for tone, for the type of message, but also for data collection and conversion. Ultimately to enable upsell and cross-sell by knowing your customers better. Programmatic is a key area. Clicks did some interesting research showing that programmatic, basically it's cheaper and more flexible. And flexibility is key in this time. And also consumer presence and available impressions is increasing in programmatic, which is great, really good news. My tip here from our experience, and indeed the research we've done, is make sure you leverage both online and offline behavioral profiling. You want to profile consumers' purchase intent, what they do online and offline, because that's going to help you improve not just the ROI you get, but the speed of ROI. If you know someone's in their purchasing window, you're going to get money back for that marketing investment faster. And as we said earlier, liquidity, cash flow is king. Hyperlocal, it's never been more important in my opinion. So hyperlocal is things like proximity marketing, geo-targeted messaging, context, always. That's what Google COVID-19 media principles are about. Google COVID-19 media principles, the first thing they say, context always. Though this is a global pandemic, its impact is local. And that's, that says it very well. It's very true. Social ads. Social ads really powerful at the moment. I mean, pre-COVID-19, almost 85% of Swedes were on social media and they were spending 90 minutes a day. Those figures have gone up by 45% now that COVID-19 is causing us to self-isolate and social distance. My tip here is to ensure that you get the best possible value for money and conversion, is make sure that when you invest in social advertising, check that you couldn't achieve the same conversion, the same cost of acquisition of a customer via a different channel, e.g. Google Display or a marketplace. You need to dynamically be allocating your budget to Facebook, Instagram, or Google, or a marketplace to make sure you get the best value for money. And speaking of marketplaces, it's something that Sweden is very immature in. Considering how mature as a digital marketing culture Sweden is, it's strange that that Sweden doesn't have more investment in platforms. Interestingly, and I'll share this information with you in the next slide, a large part of your economy is actually now run through platforms. And platform companies are recognized for being the leading innovators when it comes to digital. To give you an example, Tiendeo, we're the largest consumer shopping platform, a planning platform in Sweden. More than 1.15 million Swedes use us every month. But you probably never heard of it. So that's just some information there. Let me skip on to the next slide. So this is really for your reference. This summarizes what I've just been saying. It's an important slide, and I think maybe if you were to take only one slide from this presentation, effectively this would be one that I would be focused on. What it does is it enables you to build a business case with your CFO and your colleagues. So hopefully it's all centralized into one place. I believe we're running another survey now. Is that right?
Yes, we are. Should we start?
Let me just have a little look where we're at. Apologies, I'm skipping through things here. Yes, let's run that. Let's run that survey then.
Perfect. Right now we're gonna have two other questions to get a better interaction with everybody. And the first one is, which of these channels do you already use? So feel free to actually click more than one answer. And we're gonna publish so everybody can check what everybody else is doing. We have about 18% of answers so far. Very soon, we're going to reach to half of the attendees' answers, and I'll be publishing it right after it. Very good. Good. I think we reached most answers. Right now, let's see. We have like 47% of the attendees answered, and most of them answered more than one question, since it was a multiple choice type answers, but most of you answer social ads, which means that you're very aware of everything, of the potential of social media. And I will be setting up the next and last survey for you this webinar. Which of these channels will you be scaling or looking to optimize from now on? Feel free also to click on multiple answers on this question too. We have 29% of answers already. Very good. I think we reached most of our attendees. I'm going to publish the results. Here we have. Most of you are open to see what platforms may do for your brands, and also programmatic and hyperlocal campaigns. which shows you're very good at looking into what is new. Right now, we have like very big potentials on hyperlocal campaigns, programmatic, and platforms as well. So having the surveys done, I'm going to get back to the presentation. There you go.
Just got to forgive me. I just got to skip to the next slide. So we're moving on to the communication section. This will be the core of this of the remainder. Basically, how can we help you guys learn from best practices and fast track implementation of what works, what's really working? Some core principles. Sweden, in honesty, doesn't really suffer yet from a limitation of retail distribution channels because it's not a full lockdown. But the middle 2 points, insufficient inventory and logistics, Sweden particularly vulnerable to this because of just-in-time inventory model being so strong in Sweden. It's just-in-time inventory is not such a common business model in Spain and Germany. On the last point, communication limitations. Obviously in Sweden, events and out-of-home advertising such as billboards, they still have some value in Sweden because it's not a full lockdown. Events and out-of-home marketing is completely dead and pointless in Spain and France and things where there's full lockdown. But in Sweden, weirdly, Sweden is one of the highest producers of paper promotional leaflets in the world. I find that very inconsistent with Sweden's commitment to being environmentally friendly and green, and the fact that Sweden also has one of the highest no junk mail policies. So I think, but certainly we're seeing that channel is people are no longer interested in paper leaflets. It's a good thing to get rid of. So let me continue with this presentation. McKinsey historically have been very negative about marketing. They've always advocated marketing cuts in past recessions. Now, today, McKinsey actually see it as a vital part of the work stream to help retailers recover. This guidance is based on the hundreds of conversations that McKinsey's had with companies on the topic of COVID-19. Even more than I have to be honest. I've been involved in a number of their panels, and they see marketing as critical to retailers in this day and age. In past crises, they haven't. Again, here are some core principles that I think we'll be covering these in the remaining slides, but it's just for your reference, really. Most of this is really common sense, but the reality is common sense is not that common. And we're seeing marketers make the same mistakes over and over again. We want to help you avoid that. So let's have a look at the principles of the new customer journey. Even though Sweden's not in lockdown, this is true in Sweden as much as any other country. Where shops are open, consumers are preferring to shop locally. So hyperlocal marketing never been more important. And where shops are closed, typically non-discretionary and things like that, digital channels, they are the one and only channel that matters. It's critical, just not only for building short-term sales and ROI, but also building your future pipeline. So if you're in automotive or fashion, you're building a pipeline. People might not be coming to do test drives now. They might not be buying their items now, but you've got to build revenue for the future. And digital is the key to that. You can't not talk to people. This is, in some scenarios, you can get away with not communicating, and it doesn't have a negative impact on your business. All research suggests that this is not the time to stop communicating. In fact, research suggests that you should be communicating more. These slides, again, this is for you to build a business case. So I'll let you have a quick look at this. This is the sort of information you should be sharing with your CFO. To help you convince him not to cut your budgets. Genuinely, communication with consumers has never been more important than right now. It's vital. The reason I say that, so when you're talking to your CFO, I have a number of slides here that show why you need to keep investing in marketing. You can share with your CMO. I remember when I was a marketing director and having to fight to protect my marketing budget during virus outbreaks, during recessions. Marketing typically is always the first function to be cut. So you need to make a bulletproof case for marketing investment. To be honest, not just to maintain your existing pre-COVID-19 marketing levels, I would be aiming and fighting for an increased spend in marketing during COVID-19 outbreak and going into recession. I believe that very strongly. You know, the business case for marketing investment is incredibly strong. I mentioned McKinsey are typically very negative about marketing. Even they are saying that retail marketing should go on the offensive. To give you an example that I was involved in this and that McKinsey had documented, TK Maxx, a fashion retailer, they basically increased their marketing spend by 15% in 2008. It was a strategy to target new customers outside of their core existing customer base. 2009, 1 year after this increase in marketing spend, the company reported 75% of 2009 shoppers in TK Maxx stores had never shopped in TK Maxx the year before. That's an incredible achievement. And that gives you an idea of what a huge opportunity the crisis gives. It's not just, it's not all doom and gloom. There is genuinely opportunity there for the marketers that work cleverly and strategically. So yeah, here is some more information on why you should advertise now. Are you guys familiar with excess share of voice, ESOV? If so, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's also the threat of direct-to-consumer. For physical bricks and mortar retailers who don't seize initiative during COVID, direct-to-consumer brands could easily steal your market share. One thing we've noticed, some of the smartest retail marketers are actually using this COVID-19 time because the noise levels are less, there's less marketing activity happening. They're actually using it to reposition their brand and products. I think that's a very smart move. Going back to why it's a good time to invest, I suppose. The reality is customer lifetime value hasn't changed. Just because of this COVID-19 disaster, this crisis. So customer lifetime value hasn't changed, but digital advertising is incredibly discounted. I mean, Facebook CPCs are down by 20%, and CPMs are down by more than 50%. So considering that customer lifetime value remains the same, this is a great time to be spending money. If you have money to invest now, you're going to win. Sometimes people get a bit confused, not necessarily you as a professional marketing person, but some people get confused by exactly what excess share of voice is. So this slide is hopefully going to help you explain that to your non-marketing colleagues, such as your CFO, and help you secure the budget that you need to win more market share coming out of this crisis and in recovery. So I think we've covered now the important point of why you need to invest more in marketing during the crisis. This is a really interesting thing. It's about working out what digital practices are best suited to this scenario, how you allocate your budget. Repeated studies have shown, this is through many different economic cycles in many different countries, repeated studies by the leaders in marketing effectiveness research, that's Bitt & Field, amazing research. They've shown in their studies that to have the optimal balance for growth and recovery in these situations, marketing spend needs to be allocated 60% to long-term brand building activity and 40% to short-term sales activation, ads basically. Any other mix does not perform as well. So 60% long-term brand building, 40% ads activation. And this is not so much for you guys, but if you need to explain what is brand building, what is sales activation, this will help for your non-marketing colleagues. This slide illustrates why brand building is so essential. The brands that have the strongest brand awareness, they're the ones that recover fastest from recession. It's a huge difference between strong brands and weaker brands. And similarly with advertising, Gartner goes as far as saying you've got to protect your digital and MarTech investments, specifically in the advertising space. We're seeing huge amounts of research has been done on this over the years. Studies going back over a century have shown the advantages of maintaining and increasing your marketing budgets during a weaker economy. Those advertisers that have maintained or grew their ad spend, they're the ones that have thrived and won market share post disasters such as we're in now. So the next sort of area that we really should have a look at is key messages. There's nothing particularly clever that we're going to show you here, but you need to communicate, and the key to effective communication is being transparent and genuinely trying to be helpful. So I would suggest you define expectations to remove uncertainty and reduce stress. Interestingly, 80% of consumers in France, Spain, and Italy that we surveyed, they actually resent retailers that don't publish updated opening times because it stressed them out. That was the reality. So that's something you want to avoid doing. You want to try and be as genuinely helpful to consumers as possible. As we mentioned, Sweden is famous for its just-in-time inventory model. So you guys have some challenges around inventory and stock availability. We've actually created a tool specifically to help with this issue. We call it our dynamic catalog. So we're happy to give you some insight on that and explain it if anyone's interested. But it's very stressful for consumers to find they come to your store and they don't. You guys don't have in stock what they want. You want to avoid that scenario. It has a very negative impact on brand equity. The next point is protection. People need to feel safe. I think in Sweden at the moment, there's a lot less concern around COVID-19 than in other countries. But to give you an example, in France, Spain, and Italy, the average is 70% of consumers won't go to a retailer's physical location if they haven't received, if they aren't assured, if they don't have assurance from a clear statement around protection measures, such as cleaning schedules, masks, etc. People are that fearful of even going into a physical retail environment in Spain and Italy. I don't think that's the situation now in Sweden, but I think that trend is coming. I think it's a reality we're looking at. The next point is it's really important to communicate the availability of your e-com options, your remote shopping options. Interestingly, again in Spain, France, and Italy, 40% of consumers weren't aware of the remote shopping options that their local retailers offered. That's a terrible lapse in communication, a really big mistake that marketers are making. So make sure you're promoting awareness of online delivery, click and collect, drive-through. Make consumers aware of how you're making their life easier. It's really important. Something that came up when I was talking to McKinsey, and I think it's really important to stress this. Promotions have never been more important than now. You've got to continue doing promotions. You can't stop doing them. Remember, I talked about the optimal marketing mix being 60% brand building and 40% sales activation. Promotions, they're part of that 40% sales activation. Because cash flow and liquidity are so important in a recession and crisis environment, you need to do promotions because it drives your speed of return on investment, which helps your CFO with short-term liquidity. So please, make sure you're doing promotions. Consumers don't resent promotions. If you do promotions that are highly targeted to consumers who are in their buying window and you present them with relevant offers, consumers will not resent you. They'll be grateful. It's not opportunistic. It's not taking advantage of the consumer. It's 100% appropriate. Consumers are more price conscious than ever. They want promotions from you. So give the people what they want. To be honest, I think you should be increasing your promotion activity, not reducing it. Really important. That leads me on to the communication model. You've got to be sensitive to people. Tone is really important. So, make your promotions and all of your communications appropriate. What I mean by that is emotionally intelligent, not salesy or insensitive. In Sweden, there's a trend that I think is even more relevant than the traditional strength of emotional communication. And that's what I call societal communication. Most consumers want to hear what brands are doing to actually help at a society level. Actions speak louder than words. And there's a lot of consumers have fatigue. They're not interested in hearing the small things you're doing to help. They want to know that you're really helping society. I think that's particularly important in Sweden, where there's such a strong sense of civic social responsibility. But it's true across all sectors, in all countries. The consumer wants communication from you. They want to hear what you have to say and to know that you're doing things to help. Interestingly, a number of marketers I've been speaking to, they have been saying they're going to focus on existing customers only in the crisis and recession. This is a huge mistake. Absolutely one of the biggest mistakes you can make. You've got to go broad. Retention, of course, is important, but there's a huge opportunity to win new customers. I mentioned the TK Maxx study earlier, where 70% of their customer base 1 year after the financial crisis of 2008 were completely new customers. That's because they realized the opportunity that this crisis offers. To back this up, 95% of consumers in Sweden are willing to change from their regular retailer, from their regular provider. This is some insight that the Tiendeo survey of Swedish shoppers told us. The survey was done in March 2019. So these are shoppers who are active during the coronavirus. 95% of consumers in Sweden are willing to change their regular retailer. Huge opportunity for you to win market share. Even if you're a Coop or an IKEA who have almost a monopoly, a duopoly of market share and dominate their supermarket space, there's an opportunity even for them to win market share. So with your marketing, go broad. Go to as big an audience as you can, not just your existing customers. Really important. Other things that are worth knowing, this is something that we created because we thought it would help, and it might be very relevant. In Sweden, cashback as a culture is very strong. So this might be interesting to some of the brand owners who are attending today. Maybe a retailer isn't offering a promotion on your products in their stores. Tiendeo's cashback product that we created for this situation enables brands to incentivize consumers to buy the brand. Basically, the consumer can get cashback from the brand directly. And they also have the option of donating that cash back to nominated charities, to effectively do good with their consumerism and benefit causes that matter, supporting nurses, for instance. And interestingly, this form of conscious consumerism had a very strong engagement impact in Spain. There was a lot of brand equity that came from it. And in Sweden, I can see this being true as well. I apologize that I'm talking a lot. I genuinely hope that this content is useful to you guys. I mentioned earlier that the situation is always changing. I talked about Tiendeo's dynamic catalog that we created especially to enable real-time communication of things like not just your messaging, but stock availability and so on. That's using geo-targeted, paperless digital communication. And it's a tool that, if any of you are interested in learning more about, happy to discuss with you guys. Finally, your communication's got to be flexible, as we said. It's going to be changing constantly. That's what best practice in today's environment means. Lots of test and learn. So here are some conclusions for you, just to recap what we've covered so far. Effectively, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. I realize it's been a lot of information. I've been talking constantly. Now is the time for your questions. And if we don't have time for all questions now, we will be able to, I'm happy to do some one-on-ones with you guys. Cesar, what sort of questions have we had coming in during my presentation?
Let's see. So far, we haven't received anyone, but I see somebody's typing. So let's just wait a little bit and see what we have got. Everybody, the chat for questions is open now. You're able to interact and try to clarify any kind of doubts you have about the presentation, impacts on business, or either a little bit of our products we spoke about, market trends. To ask whatever you feel like.
One question, Cesar, that came to me directly, someone actually invited to the webinar. They'd never heard of Tiendeo before. So just a bit of background, I suppose, in the context of Sweden. It's to give you an idea, the Handelsstrada, I hope I pronounced that right, effectively the retail organization in Sweden, they've stressed that an increasingly large part of the economy is now run through platforms. that platform companies are at the leading edge as far as digital development is concerned. Tiendeo is one of these platforms. So we're not Amazon. We're not selling anything directly. We are effectively a dating agency between purchase-ready consumers and retailers that are able to provide the product or service that the consumer is looking for. It's 1.15 million Swedes use the Tiendeo platform every month, and it's over 2 million in the Nordic region. So that's that's how Tiendeo has some unique insights into consumer behaviour in Sweden, and it's also we have a range of solutions to help retailers and brands, of course, as well.
We've got two questions here. First one, let's see. Alex, do you think about what do you think about paper catalog distribution? Will it be replaced by digital 100%?
In honesty, I think paper catalogs will continue. I don't think it'll disappear 100%. One of our clients in France, a casino group, they have removed 100% of paper catalogs. They're 100% committed to digital, but I think they're unusual. I think certainly for my grandma, she's over 100 years old, she likes the paper catalog. So for certain people, paper catalogs are still relevant, they're still effective. But the reality is, right now in COVID-19, completely ineffective. There are hundreds and hundreds of millions of paper catalogs sitting, no one's touching them. No one wants to touch anything that they don't need to. And going forward, I think we're going to see digital replacements. Tiendeo, for instance, we have a digitalization of paper catalogs. And there are many companies that do this, and it's more cost effective, it's more personalized, it's more real time. The benefits over outdated paper catalogs are huge. So for a very small percentage of the population, paper catalogs are still relevant, but it's a mobile first world, it's a digital first world. So really, paper catalogs, they're outdated technology.
Perfect. Let's go to the next question. Our country is in full lockdown and our stores are closed. However, we can still take orders and deliver after lockdown. Have other countries seen success doing this?
Yes. I think this might be from someone in South Africa. I've seen a number of people in South Africa where they have this similar model. E-commerce isn't as mature in South Africa. And they've actually said only essentials can be delivered by e-commerce. So if you were someone who has a non-essential, such as Leroy Merlin was one I was speaking to recently around this topic. So they're a DIY building materials company. But literally, yes, it does work. It's not ideal. In an ideal scenario, people would be able to order a product and get it in real time during the crisis. But pre-ordering and building a pipeline online, that works. And certainly in the automotive space and the fashion space, we've seen a very similar pattern where they're not making sales now. People aren't doing test drives of cars and things like that. People aren't buying as much summer wardrobe and things now, but you are able to build a pipeline of online sales for the future.
But if I could add a bit of an answer to this question, I think the key for this process here is to actually make very clear with your client when you're going to be able to deliver and to answer their demands or actually deliver their products. That's going to be very important, and make this process as transparent and as clear as possible throughout the purchase journey. Alex, I think that the questions were all were these two questions for today. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I think everyone's probably heard enough from me. I genuinely hope we'll be sharing the slides with everyone. We genuinely hope that these slides will help you build a strong business case for marketing investment in your company, and that you guys will apply some of the strategies that we've recommended. There are no cure-alls, there are no silver bullets, but if you're able to invest in marketing in this crisis scenario, and if you invest in the correct digital marketing channels, so programmatic, hyperlocal, social ads, and so on, And if you use the correct messaging, so the tone, the societal, emotional, psychologically appropriate messaging, go broad with your messaging. So reach out to the entire market, not just your existing customers. And if you have a culture of constantly updating your messaging and adapting it, test and learn, basically getting feedback from the voice of the customer. If you want, we're happy to help in that way. If you implement these things, you're going to be the winners in this scenario. And genuinely, anyone attending today who wants to leverage the Tiendeo platform, we're happy to provide on a free basis, a free trial, or just really to get your message out there, so you can see how what we do works, and hopefully help your consumers and help drive some success for your business. So thank you very much for your time today. And of course, if you have any questions moving forward, my email is on the bottom of the webinar that you'll be sent, the webinar slides. Feel free to drop me a line there or on LinkedIn, where many of us are already connected. And I'll genuinely do my best to help you formulate a strategy for growth and success moving into the recovery phase. Thank you very much for your time, guys. That will be all for today. It says, oh, I'm very bad at the technology side, so could you turn us off? And thank you very much for attending, everyone. Any questions? I'm on email, and yeah, have a great day.
Bye.